Okay, hello Internet. Welcome to this week's video and post. So the post is obviously out. You can go check it out. It has a lot more details than this video will. And the book that I read this week is all about Infosec Playbooks, which I like to kind of think of as kind of like cookbooks, where you walk through instructions on how to complete a task. In a nutshell, a playbook within the information security area it's very broad. There's a lot of people included in it, depending on the scenario. So if a massive attack happens to your company, the incident response team or the SOC team, the Security Operations Center, they'll have some sort of playbook for specific scenarios. And that playbook will tell each person what they should or shouldn't do based off of the scenario. So if a bunch of data is leaked out of your company and it's attacked and someone kind of exfiltrates a whole bunch of information, you'll have to get PR, legal, executive management, as well as the forensics and IR incident response teams. Everybody has to get involved to kind of fix this issue. This book is basically how to craft an InfoSec playbook in the right way. These authors, their way is right to them, and I think it's pretty good. It's obviously the first time I've read anything about playbooks, so it seems right. It seems accurate. It seems interesting. The book's not too long. It's a pretty short read. Instead of basically telling you all about the book like I usually do or sometimes do, I just wanted to point out two things. So this should be a shorter presentation just to kind of walk you through two ideas that I found interesting and I thought might be useful and interesting to you. So without further ado, let's talk about Infosec Playbooks. So the two topics I want to talk to you about are two ideas of one's trade-offs and the other one's don't block but divert. And the trade-offs piece is interesting because throughout all of life, no matter where you are, what you're doing, you're always making trade-offs. Every decision you make consciously or subconsciously, there's some sort of trade-off being made. And that's no different for the InfoSec area. We'll talk about two trade-offs in the trade-off section. And then the other piece is don't block but divert. And this is all around kind of the different levels of maturity for a security center or security operation. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, trade-offs. One of the trade-offs we're going to talk about is the placement and detection methods or detection/prevention methods of devices around your network. So there's two ideas here. So one's inline and out of band that I've mentioned here. So you have these devices, intrusion detection systems or intrusion prevention systems, and just think of them as like boxes. So we have these boxes, right? And you put these boxes around your network. And depending on where you put the box in your network directly correlates to what that box does, and also depending on the type of box you get. And there's two different types of boxes you can get in this scenario, right? So we have inline boxes, which are intrusion prevention systems, and then we have out-of-band boxes, which are intrusion detection systems. And the difference between these two is an inline box is literally in line of the two things talking. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to push it now because there's a lot of stuff going on. So imagine a computer here and a computer here. So we have A and B. In line would be you put your box right in the middle of the two computers. And then out of band, you have the two computers communicating, but you put your box outside of the line in between those two. And what you do for this out of band box is you just basically copy all the traffic going in between these two computers onto this. So you're not necessarily interfering with the traffic, you're just duplicating it. So those are two different types of boxes, and each of them have pros and cons. So if you have a box that's in line of the two computers speaking, that box has the ability to stop any attacks or any bad behaviors between the two computers or traffic. So that gives it the ability to basically prevent movement of traffic. But a con that comes with that pro is that when you have something in line of these two computers, there's a chance that it'll slow down the traffic because that box has to check every single piece of traffic that's flowing through it. And that can be an issue. And also, you can actually start preventing legitimate traffic from coming through because you think it's bad, because maybe 3 years ago something bad happened on the IP address, but now nothing's bad happening on it, but you're still blocking it. So that inline piece has pros and cons. The out-of-band piece has pros and cons as well. So if you have a box that's out of band of the two computers sitting outside of it, I hope you can see my hands, because if not, this would be a waste of my hands. So if you have something out of band of the two computers, basically what's happening is everything's being duplicated. And the good thing about that is that you're not necessarily slowing down the traffic that's going through the network because you're not in line. You're just duplicating. So that's one of the benefits of out of band. Con to that is that if something bad happens on the network that's being moved around the traffic, you can't stop it. You're just observing. So it's basically like if you watch someone, you're standing there and you're watching someone rob your house, you can't do anything about it because you're out of band. You're just observing. So that's the same thing happening here, where you can see things and you're not necessarily getting in the way of the traffic and the flow, but at the same time, you just can't really do much. Those are the two things. And the thing with this trade-off is that choosing either box is a trade-off, because you choose one, you lose the pros of the other, and you choose the other, you lose the pros of the other. But in this situation, luckily, you're actually able to combine these two variations of boxes together and get the benefits of both worlds, and kind of negating the cons of each. So I got a graph here that's going to hopefully explain this. So here we have a graph, right? So we have the internet with our little rainbow person on the computer, and the internet's coming into our system. And you see that there's into our network. So you see there's a wireless section of the network, there's a DMZ area with a bunch of servers, and then there's also the internal network where you have all our different areas. What I've done is I've included marks on here just to kind of explain the benefits of each. So down here in the bottom section, we have kind of our office. So this is where all our workstations are. In the center, we have kind of our super secret databases we don't want anybody to get access to. And then on the other hand side, we have our SCADA systems. So imagine if this is maybe like, I don't know, a power generation company. There's some sort of like industrial infrastructure that they're running as well. So all these areas in the bottom are areas that are varying in value for the attacker, and also vary in secrecy on what we want to get and want to protect. So what I've included in here are additional arrows here. So you can see I've included different sections and different areas where you can basically combine these two trade-offs, so the inline and out of band different boxes, and depending on where they're placed in the network, depends on kind of their features and their functions and their purpose. So we'll start with the DMZ. So the DMZ area, the demilitarized zone area, this section is obviously, it needs to be accessible by the internet, because this is basically where the services that we're providing to those through the internet, they have to get access to it somehow, way, shape, or form. So it has to have access to the internet. So with that being said, we shouldn't really put too many valuable or secrecy things in this section. And also, we don't want to slow down the traffic, because this is the uptime for this area is pretty important. So most likely we're going to put some sort of out of band box here. So it's not going to be in the way of anything, but it's going to be just observing. And by observing, it can detect if anything bad happens. But remember, it's not slowing the traffic down. The other out of band section is in the office area. So if we have our office and our workstation, a lot of people are going to kind of be concerned with being speedy on how they're able to send things back and forth, and how they're able to kind of move around within the network easily. So that might want to be an out of band section as well. And then the other two inline ones, I have the secret database and the SCADA system. So these two sections should be minimal traffic, and the traffic going into these sections should be specified on who should or shouldn't be involved here. So with an inline box here, you can basically specify who should come in, who should leave, and how much traffic should flow through on an average basis. And by putting an inline section here, you're slowing down the traffic, but you're also being more secure. So basically the nutshell here is when you have something that's super secret and you want to protect it, inline is probably your best option. If you have something that has to have high availability and high throughput, a lot of people are interacting within that space, out of band is probably your best option. So that's kind of the trade-off here for that piece. The next trade-off I want to talk about is kitty cats. Okay, so the next trade-off I want to talk about is when you're creating alerts within a system or a network, when you're alerting yourself on different attack methods that are happening in your network, you have to write these alerts through some sort of query. You're querying a database of logs, or you're querying some sort of real-time logs to check if something bad's happening. And when you're writing these queries and you're constructing these queries for these alerts, there's two different types of queries you can write that tend to be written. So there's general queries and there's specific queries. And most companies kind of fall on both sides depending on the scenario. And with a general query, we'll do our little kitty cat here. So with a general query, when you do an alert, there's a good chance that your security analyst is going to be overwhelmed, and there's going to be too many choices, as you can see with our cat. And when you have a general query, there's a lot of false positives that are coming through your network and alerting your security analyst. So this can be a huge issue, because it can take up a lot of their time, a lot of their energy and their attention, and it's being diverted to something that doesn't necessarily matter. So it's important to kind of make sure that your queries aren't too general. And then on the other side is something that's too specific. So here we have two identical bunnies and two identical cups. And the issue here is if you write an alert that's too specific and a query that's too specific for an alert, you will never catch anything outside of what's identical to that thing. And for instance, this could be a hash, a domain name, something along those lines that are very specific. And if you have a very specific alert, you'll catch that identical thing. But if there's any mutations of this attack, just a small mutation, I think there was an example that I listened to someone give that was basically there's some sort of attack called mimcats, and they changed it from mimcats to like mimkittens, and it bypassed antivirus engine that was protecting a system. So basically, by only using these specific alerts, you're going to miss a lot out, but you'll get the identicals. And the thing here is you need to find a happy medium. Basically, you have to find like the Goldilocks zone where you're not too general and not too specific, but you're right in the center. And another thing I wanted to mention here with this specific alerts is that they do have a place in networks. So you should have very specific alerts as long as they're being constantly updated and they're being managed through some sort of a threat intelligence system. So if you have like a threat intel management system that's being updated by all the open source and threat intelligence being funneled into it, and those specific alerts are being baked into your network alerts, that's good because you can basically track and see what attacks are happening at this moment in time. You can check them and they're being, aged out and they're not sitting around for too long and everything is up to date. So specific is okay, but it's not something that you should always do everywhere. So that's the trade-off section for the queries and reports. Next, we have don't block, but divert. What I want to talk about here is leveling up. So there's different types of security operations in different companies, and every security company or security operation within a company is at a specific maturity level. So you have kind of security operations that have just been created, and you have security operations that have been a while, and they have a lot of experience, and they have a lot of knowledge, and they have basically curated their network into a very secure location. And as you evolve over time, usually security operations, when they start out or when someone gets into the security space, they think that the best way to go about this is to basically block everybody from getting into the network, protecting it, making sure that nothing goes in or goes out, and you're mainly blocking a lot of stuff and you're being very defensive and you're putting a hard wall around your network. But over time, the more experience you get, the more you realize that you will never be able to protect your network 100% of the time. There's always a way in, and there's always going to be someone that exploits that vulnerability. So it's important to realize that your network will be hacked, and when it is penetrated and breached, it's important for you to take up the second half of the defense thing, is basically ensuring that you're able to detect and mitigate any movements that attacker has done when they breached your network. So there's kind of two camps, right? You're sort of evolving and you're going up levels in your maturity operations of a security group. So you have kind of like the youngsters that are really hard on blocking everything and preventing everything. And then you have the more experienced, old timers or whatever you want to say. And these guys or these girls have more kind of leveled out perspective on security because they realize that people will get in. So it's important that we can detect and mitigate in addition to preventing and blocking. So that's that piece. And what I wanted to show here is a scenario. And I want to talk about a specific thing about diverting. So here we have our beautiful little network, and we have the internet coming in. We have a firewall, some servers, workstations, database. It's super simple. I don't want to spend a lot of time messing around with this, but this is kind of a general idea, right? So we have things going on here. And we're trying to protect it. We're doing our best to protect it. But what happens is an attacker gets access to, they drop some malware on one of our computers because maybe someone clicked the link or they went to a bad website or whatever. So they have malware on their workstation now. And once that malware is on your workstation, that malware is going to actually, one of the first things that they usually do is they kind of phone home. They phone home to their C2 server, which is a command and control server. And that command and control server can do a lot of stuff. It can send additional information to this malware to download some more stuff to exploit, or it can tell it what to do, whatever it needs to do. So it's kind of like the mothership, and you have your malware out here. And a more inexperienced security operation, kind of new on the levels, right? They would think that they want to block everything. So they want to make sure that this malware is not communicating to the C2 server and the C2 server is not communicating to the malware. And they want to block everything and stop it. And that's good. That's a good idea if you can't do anything else. But in a more advanced security team, depending on the scenario, depending on the situation, they might not necessarily want to block it. What they might want to do is they might want to divert it. And this method is called sinkholing. So you're sinkholing the communications between the C2 server and your malware on the workstation, and you're basically diverting that communication into something else or into a black hole. So you can divert it into a black hole and you can just observe what information is being sent between the 2 points. So you can see what your malware is sending out to the internet trying to contact the C2 server and seeing how it acts, how it behaves. And that's one way, but another way is you can divert it into maybe a honeypot or a honey network. So if I put this here, you can see that what we've done is we've actually diverted the communications from this malware and this computer into the honeypot. So we've sinkholed into the honeypot. Sinkhole? I don't know. We basically diverted it into the honeypot. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to watch this malware move around in this network and see kind of what it's doing and how it's behaving. And as a more advanced security operation, what you do is you can actually observe this malware, see how it behaves, and you can write future queries and future alerts to actually look out for similar attacks to this. So what you're doing is you're actually building intelligence off of this thing that's attacked you, ensuring that future things like it won't attack you. So that's one thing that it came from the book I thought was interesting. And that's it. That's it. We're going to be quick, short and sweet. I think it was quick and short and sweet. We'll see. But in general, it was a good book. You should check it out if you're interested. It is specific to a specific audience, people that are building or trying to improve their security operations, but I think it's good for anyone that just wants to be empathetic and understand what it's like to be that person, to learn more about what they think about and what they're concerned with. But in a nutshell, Internet, I'll see you next week.